The moment it happened, the world collectively gasped. Prince Harry, a man whose every move had been scrutinized for decades, had finally met a crossroads that left even the most loyal royal supporters stunned. Imagine standing in a room where everything you thought you deserved, recognition, honor, inheritance, a place in the family legacy, was suddenly, irrevocably, handed to someone else. Someone quieter, someone less outspoken, someone who never demanded the spotlight. That was the scene inside Buckingham Palace when news broke that Zara Tindall had been granted a prestigious new title, while Harry, despite years of expectation, remained empty-handed. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Can you picture the look on Harry's face at that moment? Shock, disbelief, perhaps even a twinge of humiliation. For someone who had spent years navigating the treacherous waters of public scrutiny, stepping out of the royal shadows, and trying to carve out a space for himself in both media and monarchy, this was not just a disappointment. It was a blow to his very sense of identity. But the story doesn't stop there. What you think you know about this royal drama, the inheritance, the tension, the family power plays, is only scratching the surface. What actually unfolded behind palace doors has layers of secrecy, betrayal, and emotional stakes that would leave even seasoned royal watchers gasping. Let's rewind for a moment. Picture a room filled with subtle tension, ornate chandeliers casting a golden glow over the polished floor, portraits of monarchs staring down like silent judges. The announcement came, seemingly casual, almost bureaucratic, a new title for Zara Tindall. Yet, the weight of it landed like a thunderclap. Conversations froze mid-sentence. Cameras clicked. Courtiers exchanged nervous glances. And somewhere, out of sight but not out of mind, Harry digested the news that he had been overlooked. Not for the first time in his life, but perhaps in a way that cut deeper than any public criticism could. Why does this matter to you, the viewer? Because this isn't just another headline about the royals. It's a story of entitlement, family rivalry, the invisible line between perception and reality. It's about how power is wielded quietly, how recognition is given or withheld, and how the ambitions of one family member can collide with the expectations of another in ways that ripple across generations. And make no mistake, this moment has consequences that extend far beyond the palace walls. The public may see Harry smiling for cameras, making carefully worded statements, and engaging in charity events. But the private truth? It's far more combustible. You might wonder, how could Zara Tindall, who has always maintained a quieter, grounded life, suddenly become the beneficiary of such royal favor? It seems almost paradoxical. She's known for her equestrian accomplishments, her disciplined work ethic, and her refusal to court media attention unnecessarily. She doesn't seek the limelight in the way Harry did. Yet here she is, elevated in a manner that many insiders describe as unexpected but meticulously considered. Meanwhile, Harry, who navigated tabloids, media scrutiny, public appearances, and philanthropic ventures, is left with nothing tangible, no title, no added privileges, no recognition of his expectations. The irony is sharp, the tension palpable. And then there's the inheritance angle. For years, whispers circulated about Harry's position within the family legacy. Some claimed he was promised recognition, if not in title, then in influence, financial allocation, and ceremonial consideration. Others argued these promises were more informal, perhaps even strategic distractions to keep him engaged and loyal. But today, in the stark light of Zara's elevation, all those assumptions seem to evaporate. How do you navigate the moment when what you thought was guaranteed, what you were assured was coming, is instead quietly and decisively rerouted to someone else? It's a question that cuts to the heart of human emotion, disappointment, envy, resilience, and pride. The human element here cannot be overstated. Even the most measured royal observer might feel a twinge of sympathy. Harry is not a man used to being overlooked, especially not in matters that touch on family legacy and identity. Imagine the private moments, a quiet corridor, the hum of palace lighting, the rustle of expensive fabrics, and Harry's thoughts racing. What does he do? Who does he turn to? Can he express frustration without creating scandal? Does he retreat inward, or does he attempt another public display of his worth? The questions themselves create tension, And the answers, at least the ones the public rarely sees, are explosive. Yet, amid the tension and quiet humiliation, there's a broader story unfolding. This moment reflects the shifting dynamics within the modern royal family, who holds influence, how recognition is distributed, and how the old rules about inheritance, precedence, and respect are quietly bending to new priorities. Zara Tindall's new title isn't just a personal victory for her. It's a signal to the rest of the family and to the world that accomplishment, discretion, and timing can outweigh expectations, media coverage, and public campaigning. And for Harry, who has long navigated these same corridors with passion, energy, and sometimes controversy, the message is clear. Being outspoken, visible, or media-savvy does not automatically translate into recognition at home. Let's also consider the psychological dimensions. What happens when expectations clash with reality in such a public and symbolic context? Psychologists might call it a collision between perceived entitlement and actual reward. For Harry, this isn't simply a professional setback. It's a personal blow. The palace corridors he once roamed with certainty now echo with questions. The strategies he employed, the appearances he meticulously crafted, the causes he championed, all feel, in that moment, like they've been sidelined. It's a reminder that in families, even those as powerful and public as the royals, merit does not always equate to reward, and visibility does not always equate to power. And what about Zara? She emerges not as a contender, but as a symbol. Her rise underscores a paradox. Sometimes, humility, patience, and quiet achievement can outshine loud ambition. She didn't campaign for recognition in headlines or tabloids. She worked steadily, proving herself through consistent, tangible accomplishments. And when the time came, she received what Harry and the public might have assumed was his. It's a lesson in timing, perception, and influence, one that is both ironic and, for some, satisfying. By now, you might be asking yourself, what was Harry's immediate reaction? Did he confront family members? Did he storm out in frustration? Or did he retreat, stewing in private? And more importantly, what does this mean for the larger narrative of succession, inheritance, and royal prestige? The answers, as insiders suggest, are far more complex and fascinating than a simple yes or no. There are private discussions, strategic maneuvers, and quiet negotiations taking place, all under the radar, all contributing to a drama that the public is only beginning to glimpse. The tension doesn't stop with the family either. Media outlets, royal commentators, and social media users exploded in speculation. Headlines screamed of betrayal, ambition, and jealousy. Public opinion polarized. Some sympathized with Harry, others applauded Zara's quiet ascent. Memes circulated, debates raged, and experts weighed in on who truly deserved recognition. But amidst the chatter, the private fallout was far more intense. Imagine the mental calculus Harry had to perform. How to respond, when to act, what to reveal, and what to conceal. Each decision had implications not just for his public image, but for his standing within the family, and for the legacy he hopes to leave behind. And just when you think the story has reached its peak tension, the plot thickens. Leaks began to surface. Whispers of secret communications, private letters, and behind-the-scenes lobbying that may have influenced the decision to grant Zara the title. Could it be that Harry was deliberately bypassed? Or was this simply the natural outcome of a family balancing achievements, personal merits, and expectations? The nuances, as insiders reveal, are staggering. There are contradictions, surprises, and emotional beats at every turn. Each revelation seems to cut deeper than the last, layering complexity upon tension, building a narrative that grips the imagination and refuses to let go. So, as we prepare to dive into the heart of this royal drama, remember this: the story of Harry, Zara, and inheritance isn't just about titles. It's about identity, ambition, and the often invisible games of power within one of the most public families in the world. It's about what happens when personal expectation collides with family decision-making, and when the public narrative diverges sharply from private reality. And most importantly, it's about what comes next, because in this story, every chapter leads to another shock, another twist, and another cliffhanger. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Could you imagine walking into a room expecting one thing? only to have the world's eyes on someone else? That's exactly what happened the day the royal announcement landed like a thunderclap. Prince Harry, long accustomed to scrutiny and expectation, found himself in a position that no royal could easily navigate. Watching someone else, someone who had quietly gone about their life without fanfare, receive the honor he had imagined was his. Zara Tindall, disciplined, composed, and deliberately low profile, had been granted a new title, leaving Harry empty-handed, speechless, and, according to some insiders, visibly shaken. The room was a portrait of poise under pressure, but the undercurrents were anything but calm. Crystal chandeliers reflected light across polished floors. Gilded portraits of monarchs lining the walls seemed almost to observe the unfolding drama. The announcement itself was delivered with measured formality, a statement of fact, seemingly devoid of emotion. Zara Tindall had been awarded a distinguished new royal title. For the public, it was a headline, a snippet of news to scroll past. But for those present, it was seismic. Courtiers stiffened, whispers rippled like shock waves, and every eye turned, some in curiosity, some in apprehension, toward Harry, whose internal reaction was, as always, guarded but impossible to conceal entirely. It started subtly, as these things often do. A stiffening of shoulders, a slight tightening of the jaw, a flicker of disbelief across the face that the cameras would miss but the keen observer could detect. Harry had spent years navigating a delicate balance between public persona and private expectation. He had fought for causes, attended endless engagements, and cultivated an image that merged charisma with responsibility. Yet here, in the space of a few sentences, all the work, all the anticipation, all the carefully laid plans seemed to evaporate. And Zara, in her usual composed manner, accepted the news with grace, the kind of quiet dignity that had perhaps, ironically, made the contrast even sharper. The public would later speculate endlessly. Was Harry visibly angry? Did he confront anyone? Did he retreat into silence? Or was there an internal storm raging beneath the surface? Some sources said he simply stood, expression neutral, processing the humiliation privately. Others claimed he attempted to smile, masking what insiders described as a fleeting but intense sense of betrayal. The truth, as is often the case with royal life, existed in layers, glimpses and interpretations, all filtered through careful observation and the lens of historical precedent. What made this moment extraordinary was not just the awarding of a title, but the symbolism embedded within it. Zara Tindall had long been respected, yes, but she had never been the one to campaign, to advocate loudly, or to push the boundaries of public perception. She had worked diligently, quietly, and methodically, building her reputation in equestrian circles and maintaining a low-profile personal life. Harry, by contrast, had navigated a very public life filled with both scrutiny and acclaim, constantly negotiating his place within the family structure, and now found that visibility offered no guarantee of reward. Have you ever felt the sting of being overlooked while someone else quietly steps into the spotlight? That is exactly what Harry faced. There is a psychological weight to being passed over in favor of someone whose approach is entirely different, whose achievements feel less visible yet are somehow deemed sufficient. In the corridors of power, recognition is rarely about effort alone. It is about timing, perception, and sometimes sheer luck. And in this instance, the timing was devastatingly cruel. Behind the public spectacle, the palace was a hive of subtle machinations. Courtiers whispered in corners, and aides jotted notes in hushed tones. Every decision, every movement, every reaction was observed, analyzed, and catalogued. The announcement was more than ceremonial, it was strategic. Zara's elevation carried messages for the entire family, a quiet statement about merit, discretion, and timing, delivered in a way that could not be ignored. And Harry, despite his prominence, was forced to absorb the implications in silence. Some commentators suggest that Harry's reaction, though private, was as calculated as it was emotional. The royal family is nothing if not observant of optics. Any overt display of anger, frustration, or disappointment could have been seized upon by the press, distorted, and weaponized against him. So, perhaps, the stoicism was itself a tactic, a shield against exposure, a way to maintain dignity even as the world shifted beneath his feet. Yet, stoicism does not erase the human element. The very real pang of being denied recognition when it was expected, the frustration of witnessing someone else receive what you believed was rightfully yours. Meanwhile, Zara's composure became a focal point of commentary. Unlike Harry, she neither sought the cameras nor engaged in public dramatics. Her reaction was measured, deliberate, almost reflective, signaling both confidence and a subtle awareness of the impact her title would have. In a way, it highlighted the contrast: the loud, ambitious, media-savvy heir versus the quiet achiever, now suddenly elevated. The irony was palpable. The lesson, unspoken but powerful, was clear. In the game of recognition, sometimes restraint is more effective than visibility. The press, of course, had a field day. Headlines varied from sympathetic to sensational. Zara Tindall triumphs, while Harry left empty-handed. Royal favor shifts. Quiet achiever outshines media darling. Prince Harry's legacy questioned after sudden oversight. Social media, as always, added its own layer of intensity. Memes circulated within hours. Twitter threads debated the fairness of the decision. Public opinion split along predictable lines. Supporters of Harry emphasized past contributions, charitable work, and sacrifices. Admirers of Zara celebrated quiet diligence and understated accomplishment. Yet beneath the chatter, the most important consequences were unseen. The private tensions that would ripple through family meetings, strategic discussions, and even future succession considerations. Then came the whispers. Some insiders suggested that the title was not just a reward for achievement, but a calculated message to Harry. That merit, in the eyes of the monarchy, was as much about comportment, discretion, and timing as it was about visibility, campaigning, or public sympathy. Others hinted that Harry's earlier media strategies, which had positioned him as a reformer, a humanitarian, and a modernizing force, may have inadvertently created skepticism among traditionalists. There were murmurs of meetings, quiet exchanges, and perhaps even attempts to reconcile expectations with family strategy, all taking place far from public eyes. Emotionally, for Harry, the impact was multi-layered. There was disappointment, of course, but also introspection, frustration, and a tinge of envy. What does it mean when recognition is given not for visibility, not for ambition, but for quiet, methodical achievement? How do you reconcile your public identity with private disappointment, especially when that identity has been built over decades of careful navigation? Harry's position, caught between expectation, personal ambition, and family tradition, became a crucible of human emotion, revealing both vulnerability and resilience. Have you ever experienced a moment where everything you assumed was guaranteed was suddenly denied? Where a quiet competitor, unnoticed for so long, stepped into the spotlight, and you were left questioning your own path? That is precisely what Harry faced. The implications extend beyond the personal. They touch on family dynamics, succession politics, and the often invisible currents of power and influence that shape the monarchy. Every smile, every carefully worded statement, every measured appearance now carried a weight far greater than the public realized. Yet, despite the tension, the story was far from over. The announcement itself was only the first act in a drama that would unfold over months, revealing layers of strategy, emotion, and unseen consequences. Leaks, insider commentary, and quiet family negotiations hinted at decisions yet to come, decisions that could redefine not just Harry's standing, but the broader trajectory of the royal family's internal politics. And Zara, seemingly calm and composed, held a position that was both enviable and strategically advantageous, setting the stage for future developments that no one could have predicted. So as the world digested the news, and as Harry absorbed the shock of being passed over, one question lingered, unspoken but unavoidable. What would he do next? Would he accept the decision with grace, recalibrate his strategy, or react in a way that would ripple through the palace and media alike? And more importantly, what consequences awaited both him and Zara in the months to follow, as the dynamics of recognition, privilege, and power continued to shift beneath the gilded ceilings of Buckingham Palace? But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What would you do if everything you thought you had earned was suddenly handed to someone else? Could you stay silent, or would desperation take over? For Prince Harry, The moment Zara Tindall received her new title, while he remained empty-handed, ignited a cascade of emotions that no amount of public composure could entirely contain. Behind closed doors, away from cameras and reporters, Harry's pursuit of recognition became a private struggle, a drama of ambition, expectation, and frustration that the public would only glimpse through whispers, leaks, and carefully managed optics. The palace corridors, usually a place of formal decorum and muted steps, seemed suddenly charged with electricity. Every footfall echoed like a drumbeat, every hushed conversation a potential minefield. Insiders reported that Harry, normally measured and strategic, was seen moving through rooms with a tension that suggested a mind racing at full speed. His efforts to carve out an independent identity, to define his own legacy separate from the shadow of his father and brother, suddenly felt undermined. Years of public service, charitable engagement, and carefully orchestrated media presence could not shield him from the sting of being overlooked. But why was recognition so crucial to Harry? To understand that, we need to look beyond titles and ceremonial honors. Recognition, in the context of the royal family, is both symbolic and functional. It confers legitimacy, influence, and a platform. It's the acknowledgement that your contributions, your ambitions, and your presence are valued within the intricate hierarchy of monarchy. For Harry, whose life had been under intense scrutiny since childhood, this acknowledgement was not merely about ego. It was about identity, about validation in a family system that often operates in whispers and shadows. Sources suggest that in the hours following the announcement, Harry engaged in a series of private discussions with close aides, advisors, and perhaps even family members. Some reports describe him pacing quietly in private chambers, phone in hand, attempting to navigate the delicate terrain between expressing frustration and maintaining composure. He may have been drafting messages, letters, or statements, all with an eye toward securing what he felt was rightfully his. Yet, in this pursuit, every step carried risk. Any misstep could be amplified by the media, interpreted as a sign of instability, or, worse, used against him in the subtle power plays of palace politics. Interestingly, Harry's history of navigating such dynamics suggests both resilience and vulnerability. He has often balanced public persona with private emotions, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes precariously. Now, however, the balance seemed to tip. Recognition had eluded him yet again, and the contrast with Zara, whose composure and achievement-oriented approach had won favor, only intensified the sense of urgency. Insiders describe a mix of emotions, frustration, envy, and a simmering determination that could not be ignored. And what about the specifics of this pursuit? Reports indicate that Harry had previously raised the matter of recognition through private channels, attempting to advocate for his contributions, his philanthropic work, and his public service. Yet, the palace's decision to elevate Zara Tindall, rather than him, suggests a deliberate strategy: reward consistent achievement over media presence, patience over public visibility. For Harry, this was a contradiction to everything he had been taught about leveraging attention, influence, and public goodwill. How could he reconcile a lifetime of effort with a system that seemed, in this instance, to favor quiet accomplishment over high-profile engagement? Emotionally, the impact was profound. Imagine the sense of being sidelined despite demonstrated effort. Harry had navigated enormous public scrutiny, from global media attention to charitable commitments and international appearances. Each move had been calculated, measured, and designed to build a legacy. And yet, recognition came not from the media-savvy prince who had fought to establish himself, but from the steady, disciplined cousin who had largely avoided fanfare. The psychological weight of this realization, of being overlooked for someone who had seemingly played a different game altogether, cannot be overstated. Insiders suggest that Harry's reaction went beyond disappointment. There were reports of quiet agitation, tense phone calls, and perhaps even late-night consultations with advisors. The pursuit of recognition became almost an obsession, a personal mission to reclaim what he felt had been unjustly withheld. Some sources hint at drafts of letters to senior family members, discussions of legal nuances, and strategic plotting to secure some form of acknowledgement. Each effort, however, was shadowed by the risk of public exposure. Harry had to balance desire with discretion, ambition with strategy, and private emotion with the optics of the royal image. Yet, amid the tension, contradictions emerge. Harry had long been critical of the monarchy's rigid structures, publicly advocating for reform and transparency. He had distanced himself from certain traditional expectations while simultaneously relying on the legitimacy of his family position to bolster initiatives and charitable work. Now, when a clear opportunity for recognition arose, a tangible reward within the family structure, the system he had publicly questioned offered him nothing. How ironic, then, that the very institution he sought to reform was the one dictating this moment of denial. Directly confronting the palace was not an option. Harry's advisors reportedly cautioned against overt displays of anger or frustration. Every move had to be calculated, every response tempered by the potential for media amplification. Yet the internal struggle was unavoidable. Harry, according to sources, oscillated between private reflection and outward composure, a duality that left him emotionally exhausted. The pursuit of recognition had become both a psychological and strategic battle, one that required careful navigation through a labyrinth of familial politics, public expectation, and personal ambition. At the same time, Harry's relationships with other family members were under strain. Observers noted subtle shifts in behavior, more reserved interactions at family events, quieter participation in ceremonial occasions, and a heightened awareness of the optics of presence and absence. The pursuit of recognition was not just about titles or honorifics. It was about positioning within a system where visibility, influence, and perception are intertwined. And in this delicate ecosystem, any misstep could have long-lasting consequences. But here's the twist. While Harry pursued recognition, others within the family were playing their own games. Zara Tindall's elevation, for instance, was not merely a reward for achievement. Insiders suggest it was also a strategic move, signaling a broader recalibration of influence and favor within the monarchy. Her rise highlighted not just her accomplishments, but the shifting priorities of the royal family. Patience, discretion, and measured action were now being valued over visibility, campaigning, and public bravado. For Harry, this was both a lesson and a provocation, a challenge to reconcile his ambitions with the evolving dynamics around him. Emotional stakes ran high. Harry, despite public appearances of calm, was reportedly grappling with frustration, a sense of injustice, and even envy. He had dedicated years to public service, charitable initiatives, and carefully curated media presence, yet recognition, the very affirmation he had sought, was denied. Meanwhile, Zara, quietly and deliberately, became the beneficiary of what he had long believed was his due. The contrast was stark, the irony sharp, and the personal stakes profound. Have you ever experienced a moment where all your effort seems invisible while someone else reaps rewards you believed were meant for you? That is exactly the position Harry found himself in. And yet, the public narrative would not immediately reflect the turmoil behind closed doors. He maintained composure in front of cameras, smiled at ceremonial events, and continued his charitable engagements. But privately, the pursuit of recognition had become a consuming focus, a personal mission to secure acknowledgement in a system that was not inclined to grant it easily. What's most fascinating is the interplay between public perception and private struggle. Harry's efforts to advocate for himself were deliberately muted, constrained by the need to maintain appearances. At the same time, insiders hint at an undercurrent of tension, private discussions, and strategic considerations that had the potential to alter the trajectory of his position within the family. Each move carried weight, each decision could tip the balance, and every delay only intensified the urgency of his pursuit. And just when it seemed that Harry's efforts might bear fruit, another complication emerged. Leaks surfaced, whispers of secret conversations, mentions of potential avenues for recognition, and hints of internal family negotiations. Each snippet of information created hope, only to be countered by the reality of palace strategy. The pursuit of recognition became a labyrinthine challenge, requiring both patience and persistence, cunning and diplomacy. But what came next would expose Harry's vulnerability like never before, and no one saw the storm about to unfold. Have you ever wondered how someone can quietly rise to prominence while the world watches someone else scramble in desperation? That was the story unfolding with Zara Tindall, the equestrian star and cousin of Prince Harry, who had just received a new title that left Harry, the media darling, empty-handed. The shock wasn't just in the announcement. It was in the manner of her rise, the calculated timing, and the subtle strategy that had placed her directly in the spotlight, all while Harry's pursuit of recognition seemed to falter. Zara's journey to this moment was anything but ordinary, yet it was remarkably understated. From her earliest years, she had been known not for flamboyance or publicity-seeking, but for dedication, discipline, and a relentless focus on achievement. Her equestrian career, filled with rigorous training, international competitions, and medals, built her reputation quietly yet solidly. She didn't need headlines. Her accomplishments spoke for themselves. And now, those very accomplishments had earned her a recognition that carried symbolic and practical weight, a royal title that positioned her distinctly within the family hierarchy. Contrast this with Harry. His life, especially since stepping back from senior royal duties, has been a public roller coaster. Every move scrutinized, every achievement amplified by media coverage. Yet visibility and high-profile campaigns, as it turned out, did not guarantee acknowledgement from the very institution he had been part of all his life. Meanwhile, Zara, who had maintained a deliberate low-profile approach, had outmaneuvered him without a single headline-driven strategy. So, how did Zara achieve this rise? Some insiders point to a combination of timing, consistency, and perception management. Her achievements, long-standing yet often understated, had accumulated quietly. Each medal, each competition, each charitable engagement built a mosaic of reliability and competence. And in a family and institution that values discretion and demonstrated ability, Zara's cumulative record created a narrative that was impossible to ignore. The title she received was not an overnight reward. It was a culmination of years of consistent effort, strategic patience, and measured visibility. But there's more to the story than mere achievement. Sources suggest that Zara's demeanor, her composure, and her calculated interactions within the family played a critical role. She was present but not intrusive, visible but not sensationalized. Unlike Harry, she didn't attempt to force acknowledgement or dominate media narratives. Her strength was quiet, her influence subtle, and her approach aligned with a tradition that valued patience over loud ambition. In the delicate ecosystem of royalty, where optics and perception often outweigh raw effort, Zara had mastered the art of influence without overtly asserting it. Public perception of Zara's rise was immediate and pronounced. Media outlets, eager for drama, highlighted the contrast between her calm acceptance and Harry's apparent frustration. Commentators dissected her achievements, speculated on palace strategy, and framed the narrative as a lesson in humility, patience, and the quiet power of steady accomplishment. Social media erupted, with users both praising her diligence and questioning Harry's public persona. Memes juxtaposed Harry's media visibility with Zara's understated approach, creating a visual narrative of contrast that the public devoured. Inside the palace, the significance of her rise was multifaceted. It wasn't just recognition for past achievements. It was a strategic recalibration of influence within the royal family. Elevating Zara sent a message to all members. Discretion, reliability, and consistent contribution were now the metrics of favor. The decision underscored a subtle but critical point. The monarchy was signaling that titles and recognition could be earned quietly, through sustained effort and alignment with family expectations, rather than through public campaigning or media-driven notoriety. Harry's reaction to this strategic positioning was reportedly complex. While he maintained outward composure, privately he faced a combination of frustration, envy, and strategic recalibration. Observers describe a man who had long relied on visibility, charisma, and proactive engagement as a way to secure recognition suddenly confronted by a system that rewarded subtlety, consistency, and discretion. The psychological tension was immense. How do you reconcile public prominence with private denial? How do you process being passed over when you believed your path was clear and your efforts undeniable? The rise of Zara also had emotional and relational implications within the family. Her elevation altered dynamics subtly but significantly. Conversations in private chambers, long understood as controlled and measured, now carried an added weight. Family members recalibrated expectations, reassessed alliances, and evaluated influence in light of this new hierarchy. And for Harry, this was not merely an abstract shift. It was a tangible signal that his strategies, accomplishments, and efforts were being weighed against different criteria than he anticipated. Yet, Zara's elevation wasn't without its own pressures. Receiving such recognition also placed her in the spotlight, with public scrutiny and media attention following closely behind. Every appearance, every word, every gesture was now observed through the lens of her new title. And while she had prepared for public life through years of disciplined achievement, the sudden intensity of attention could be overwhelming, even for someone as measured as Zara. The balance between recognition and scrutiny became delicate, a tightrope she had to navigate with precision. Directly engaging with the public's fascination, insiders reveal that Zara maintained an almost uncanny poise. She did not seek to overshadow Harry, nor did she attempt to capitalize excessively on the new title. Her appearances remained understated, her statements thoughtful, and her demeanor consistent with the disciplined, steady approach that had characterized her life. It was this very composure that intensified the contrast with Harry's visible agitation, amplifying the narrative of unexpected reversal, quiet victory, and strategic foresight. And here is where the twist deepens. Sources indicate that the title granted to Zara may have been accompanied by privileges, responsibilities, or opportunities that positioned her for further influence within the monarchy, opportunities that Harry had assumed were reserved for him. This created not only a personal challenge for him, but also a strategic dilemma. How could he respond without jeopardizing his standing, without creating scandal, or without undermining the very reputation he had worked tirelessly to cultivate? The stakes were higher than most imagined, and the decisions he faced were complex and fraught with risk. Emotional tension reached a new level when insiders reported private conversations hinting at Harry's internal deliberation. Would he confront the decision-makers directly? Could he leverage public opinion to shift outcomes in his favor? Or would he retreat, calculating his next steps with patience and discretion? Each option carried consequences, each choice a potential escalation in a drama already fraught with anticipation and tension. The media, of course, continued to amplify the story. Headlines debated fairness, speculation ran rampant, and public fascination reached a fever pitch. Yet amid the noise, the private realities, the strategic calculations, the emotional weight, and the subtle interpersonal dynamics remained hidden. Harry's pursuit of recognition was no longer just about a title. It had evolved into a multidimensional struggle encompassing pride, identity, legacy, and strategy. Have you ever faced a situation where someone else, quietly and patiently, achieved what you had long believed was your due? Imagine the mix of admiration, envy, and urgency that fills that space. That was Harry's position, watching Zara Tindall rise, his expectations denied, his ambitions recalibrated, and the palace itself a theater of subtle, unseen maneuvers. And just when it seemed that Zara's rise might settle into a straightforward story of merit and recognition, new developments emerged. Leaks, insider commentary, and strategic positioning hinted that her elevation was only the beginning. Plans, discussions, and subtle signals were being exchanged behind closed doors, signals that could redefine influence, recognition, and even succession considerations within the family. But what came next would reveal the true depth of the palace's strategy, and Harry's response would surprise even those closest to him. Have you ever felt like the world promised you something, only to snatch it away at the very last second? That was the reality for Prince Harry as he faced what insiders have described as one of the most personally jarring moments of his life. The inheritance that he believed was coming to him simply didn't. For years, whispers had circulated about what Harry would receive, about the legacy, privileges, and recognition he was expected to inherit. Yet when the time came, while Zara Tindall stepped into the limelight with her new title, Harry found himself empty-handed, staring at a gap that was both literal and symbolic. The story of inheritance in the royal family is rarely straightforward. It's not just about wealth or property. It's about titles, influence, ceremonial privileges, and, more subtly, the acknowledgement of a place within the hierarchy. For Harry, who had spent a lifetime navigating the corridors of power, attending every event, every engagement, and maintaining his public image with painstaking precision. This denial struck at the core of his identity. The inheritance he thought was guaranteed wasn't merely material. It was emblematic of his recognition and value within the family system. Sources suggest that Harry's anticipation of inheritance had been fueled by private conversations, subtle assurances, and perhaps even casual remarks from senior family members over the years. Some of these hints were indirect. A passing comment at a royal event, a nod toward his future role, a discussion about succession and support. Yet when Zara's title was announced and Harry's expected rewards never materialized, the contrast was devastating. It wasn't just the denial itself. It was the way it underscored what insiders describe as an unspoken calculus within the monarchy, a silent message that legacy is not merely earned through effort or expectation, but through timing, strategy, and alignment with family priorities. Imagine the weight of that moment. Harry, standing or perhaps pacing quietly in private chambers, processing not just the public spectacle but the private truth. Every decision he had made, every initiative, every charitable campaign, every media appearance, now weighed against a system that had seemingly shifted under him. How do you respond when something you believed was inevitable, something you anticipated and planned for, simply does not arrive? How do you reconcile public persona with private disappointment, ambition with denial, and expectation with reality? The emotional stakes were immense. Denial of inheritance isn't simply financial or symbolic. It carries deep psychological resonance. Harry's identity, built over decades in the glare of public attention, had been partially defined by what he expected to receive from his family. That foundation was suddenly undermined. According to insiders, Harry experienced a mix of frustration, disbelief, and, some suggest, anger. These emotions, though contained in public settings, reportedly manifested in private as intense deliberation, strategizing, and perhaps even desperation. The denial also had broader implications beyond Harry personally. Family dynamics shifted subtly but significantly. Courtiers and advisors observed changes in behavior, more restrained engagement, careful observation of others' interactions, and recalibration of influence within private discussions. Harry's absence of tangible inheritance may have subtly altered perceptions of his standing within the family. Meanwhile, Zara's rise, coupled with Harry's omission, reshaped the balance of favor, positioning her as a quiet but powerful figure within the royal ecosystem. One particularly striking aspect of this moment is the contradiction it presented. Harry had long cultivated a highly public life, using visibility, charisma, and philanthropic engagement to build influence. Yet the inheritance, which he expected as a natural extension of his efforts and visibility, was awarded instead to someone who maintained discretion and understated accomplishment. The irony was profound, and it underscored a timeless principle within powerful families. Effort alone does not guarantee reward. The alignment of perception, timing, and strategic acumen often outweighs raw visibility. The palace, as always, was a masterclass in subtle messaging. Sources report that conversations with advisors emphasized caution and patience. Any overt display of frustration could create scandal, damage public perception, or even jeopardize future opportunities for recognition. Yet the private challenge remained: how to reconcile a deeply felt sense of injustice with the necessity of composure. Harry's struggle, as insiders describe, was a delicate balancing act between self-preservation, ambition, and emotional expression. Even the public, though largely unaware of the full details, sensed the tension. Media outlets speculated endlessly. Was Harry frustrated? Would he retaliate? Could he leverage public opinion to secure his inheritance? Social media amplified every rumor, every gesture, and every perceived reaction. Yet beneath the surface, the private realities were far more complex. Harry's pursuit of recognition had become a multi-layered strategic endeavor, one that required careful timing, subtle influence, and emotional discipline. Direct audience engagement is key here. How would you handle the moment when you expected reward, recognition, or validation, only to see someone else quietly step into the role you envisioned for yourself? The answer, for Harry, was not simple. Every strategy carried risk. Every action could have consequences that rippled through family dynamics, public perception, and even international media narratives. The stakes were high, and the pathways forward were uncertain. But there's another layer. Insider sources suggest that the denial of inheritance wasn't necessarily about favoritism or oversight. It may have been a calculated strategy. By withholding what Harry expected, the family system communicated subtle lessons about patience, humility, and alignment with broader family objectives. Zara's elevation simultaneously rewarded consistency and sent a signal about the criteria for recognition, a message that, while understandable in a strategic sense, cut deeply for someone whose life had been shaped by expectation. Emotionally, the impact for Harry was profound. It's not just disappointment. It's a collision of identity, expectation, and perception. He had always navigated life under intense scrutiny, balancing private emotion with public presentation. Now, denied the inheritance he anticipated, he faced a new challenge: how to maintain composure while internally processing a profound sense of denial. The emotional complexity is staggering: resentment, determination, recalibration, and perhaps even a reevaluation of his strategy for achieving acknowledgement. At the same time, this moment created a unique opportunity for reflection and strategy. Sources hint that Harry began considering alternative avenues for recognition, influence, and legacy. How could he secure validation without relying solely on family-sanctioned rewards? Could public initiatives, charitable impact, or media strategy provide the recognition he craved? These questions, circulating privately, underscored a central truth. Inheritance is not just about what is given, but how one responds to what is withheld. The tension also extended to family perception. Harry's handling of denial, whether seen or unseen, shaped how he was understood by relatives. The palace, ever observant, monitors not just achievement, but emotional intelligence, composure, and strategic navigation. Harry's response, contained but complex, became a test of both character and tactical acumen, a challenge that would define his positioning within the family for years to come. Yet even as he struggled, whispers began to emerge suggesting that Harry's exclusion was not final. Leaks hinted at possible future negotiations, alternative forms of acknowledgement, and strategic concessions that might eventually address the perceived imbalance. The denial of inheritance, it seemed, was part of a longer game, one where patience, discretion, and timing could ultimately alter the outcome. But here's the twist. Sources suggest that Harry's reaction, private yet intense, may have triggered its own set of consequences. Advisors noted heightened tension, internal debate, and subtle shifts in family dynamics, all of which hinted at future confrontations, unexpected revelations, and dramatic developments that would reshape not just his own path, but potentially the broader trajectory of royal influence and recognition. What happens next? How does a man navigate being denied what he believed was inevitable? And how will this moment ripple through the family, the media, and public perception? The answers are about to unfold, and the consequences will be more dramatic than anyone anticipated. But what came next would reveal secrets that no one expected and change everything Harry thought he knew about inheritance, power, and family loyalty. Have you ever wondered what really happens behind the closed doors of royalty, away from cameras, headlines, and public spectacle? For Prince Harry, the denial of inheritance and Zara Tindall's sudden rise didn't just create personal turmoil. It sparked a web of whispers, leaks, and subtle palace maneuvering that no one outside those gilded walls could fully grasp. The public saw headlines, social media debates, and press statements. But inside the palace, a storm of speculation, quiet conversations, and hidden communications began to unfold, revealing layers of strategy, tension, and secrets that would soon shock even those closest to the drama. Sources reveal that within hours of Zara's elevation, murmurs began circulating among courtiers and advisors. Conversations in private chambers hinted at deep-seated strategy. Why Zara? Why now? And why was Harry left out? Insiders describe hushed tones, exchanged glances, and subtle nods, all part of a carefully orchestrated dance. In such a high-stakes environment, every word, every gesture, and every reaction was a piece of the puzzle, potentially shifting alliances, influencing decisions, and shaping the trajectory of royal dynamics. Some leaks, circulating first among palace staff and then reaching journalists, suggested that Harry had been privately lobbying for recognition long before the announcement. Sources claim he had made calls, sent messages, and quietly pushed for acknowledgement, all while maintaining an image of calm and composure. But the palace, according to insiders, was unimpressed by visibility alone. They valued discretion, consistency, and alignment with family strategy, qualities Zara embodied quietly over years. Harry's lobbying, though well-intentioned, may have been perceived as impatient or even disruptive to the carefully calibrated internal hierarchy. Meanwhile, Zara's quiet confidence became a point of fascination. Staff noted her composure, her deliberate absence from media hype, and her strategic patience. While Harry's efforts were loud, visible, and public-facing, Zara's approach demonstrated restraint, a subtle understanding of the palace's value system, and an ability to navigate familial expectations without overt campaigning. And as whispers spread, the contrast became even starker. Harry, despite all his public work and media presence, appeared to be struggling with both visibility and influence, while Zara's low-profile diligence earned her tangible reward. One particularly explosive leak, reported by palace insiders, hinted at private discussions between senior family members, where Harry's expected inheritance and recognition were debated in detail. According to sources, the conversation revealed a complex calculus, weighing his contributions against his public persona, his past achievements against his approach to media, and his expectations against long-term family strategy. Zara, in contrast, required no such debate. Her record of consistent accomplishment spoke for itself, and the decision to elevate her was framed as a logical, even inevitable, step. The emotional impact on Harry was profound. Imagine being constantly aware of whispers about your efforts, knowing that your achievements are being dissected, while simultaneously witnessing the quiet ascent of someone else. Reports suggest a mixture of frustration, resentment, and determination. Private discussions reportedly included strategic consultations, careful consideration of future moves, and intense reflection on how to regain recognition without creating scandal or undermining his public image. And then there were the contradictions. Harry had long advocated for transparency, reform, and modernization within the monarchy. He had positioned himself as a champion of openness, often challenging tradition in subtle and overt ways. Yet when recognition, acknowledgement, and symbolic inheritance were at stake, the very institution he had critiqued withheld what he expected. Zara's rise, conversely, represented a continuation of tradition in its quietest form. Patient diligence rewarded at the right moment, a demonstration of the palace's enduring emphasis on subtlety, alignment, and strategy. Social media, fueled by leaks and speculation, amplified every nuance. Memes contrasted Harry's visible agitation with Zara's measured composure. Headlines questioned fairness, privilege, and meritocracy. Commentators debated whether Harry's public persona had been an asset or a liability. Each leaked detail, each whispered report, added layers of tension, intrigue, and anticipation. For the public, it was a spectacle. For Harry, it was a test of patience, strategy, and emotional resilience. Even within family gatherings, insiders describe a heightened sense of awareness. Courtiers observed subtle shifts in interactions, the careful positioning of Harry, the measured acknowledgement of Zara, and the invisible choreography of alliances and influence. Every gesture, every word, every glance carried potential significance. In such an environment, rumors were not idle chatter. They were signals, shaping decisions, strategies, and the delicate balance of power. Direct audience engagement is crucial here. If you were Harry, watching someone else quietly claim what you had long believed was yours, while whispers and leaks painted a picture of internal strategy and favoritism, how would you respond? Would you fight, strategize, or step back? The answer, insiders suggest, was a combination of all three. Harry began recalibrating, analyzing, and considering moves that balanced ambition with discretion and public presence with private maneuvering. The tension also had a subtle ripple effect on Zara. While she had achieved a milestone, the leaks and whispers created additional scrutiny. Every appearance, every public statement, and every action was now observed through the lens of her new title and the perceived contrast with Harry's efforts. Maintaining composure became paramount. as did understanding the intricate signals circulating in private corridors among staff and within family discussions. But the most dramatic revelations were still emerging. One particular leak, according to insiders, suggested that Harry's exclusion from inheritance and recognition might have been influenced by strategic considerations beyond mere merit. Some reports hinted at a desire to test his patience, assess his approach to adversity, and evaluate how he would navigate disappointment within a complex family system. The palace, in other words, was not just withholding recognition. It was observing, calculating, and planning for future alignment, influence, and legacy. Emotionally, this placed Harry in an unprecedented position. He had long relied on visibility, media presence, and proactive advocacy to secure his place. Now, he faced a system that rewarded patience, discretion, and consistent, quiet achievement. Reconciling this contradiction between public expectation and private reality, between effort and reward, became the central struggle of his post-inheritance life. And as these whispers, leaks, and private discussions continued to circulate, the story of Harry's pursuit of recognition became ever more entangled. Sources suggest strategic conversations, discreet consultations with advisors, and careful evaluation of potential next moves. Every decision had consequences, every action risked escalation, and every leak created both opportunity and tension. So the question remains, how far would Harry go to reclaim recognition that had been denied? Would he attempt direct negotiation with family members, leverage public perception, or pursue other avenues entirely? And what unseen forces, whispered agreements, or palace strategies were shaping the outcome behind the gilded doors? But what came next would expose secrets that went far deeper than anyone expected, and Harry's response would ignite a chain of events that no one saw coming. Have you ever felt the pressure of comparison, the tension of living in someone else's shadow, even when you fought to stand in your own light? That is exactly what Prince Harry faced as the ripple effects of Zara Tindall's new title and his empty-handed disappointment collided with the ever-present dynamic of sibling rivalry. Prince William, the elder brother, poised, calculated, and already embedded deeply within the machinery of the monarchy, became both a mirror and a foil, reflecting what Harry believed he deserved and intensifying the sting of what he did not. The relationship between Harry and William has always fascinated the public, portrayed as a mix of affection, competition, and occasional friction. But in this moment, the rivalry was not just personal. It was emblematic of deeper questions about recognition, power, and influence within the family. Sources suggest that Harry's sense of exclusion, of inheritance denied, of recognition withheld, was amplified by his perception of William's favored status. Every glance, every understated acknowledgement, every subtle reinforcement of William's role in family and public affairs reminded Harry that his place was still precarious. Consider the scene behind palace doors. The announcement had been made, Zara elevated, Harry overlooked. William, ever composed, was reportedly both supportive and strategically aware, navigating the delicate balance of familial love and institutional obligation. Insiders described subtle cues, measured words, gentle guidance, and sometimes, unintentionally or not, a reminder of the hierarchy that governed their roles. For Harry, this combination of personal closeness and systemic authority was a psychological crucible, intensifying the stakes of his pursuit of recognition. The tension between the brothers wasn't simply about titles or inheritance. It was also about perception, legacy, and public narrative. Harry had long sought to define himself independently of his brother, attempting to carve out a path of philanthropy, media engagement, and personal branding. William, meanwhile, had been molded by expectation, tradition, and the structural advantages of primogeniture. The contrast between their trajectories was stark, and when Zara Tindall received recognition that Harry believed he deserved, the comparison became unavoidable, emotionally charged, and strategically significant. Insiders report that in private conversations, Harry wrestled with a mix of admiration and resentment. On one hand, he recognized William's achievements, his composure, and his commitment to duty. On the other hand, he felt the deep sting of inequity, a sense that despite his own accomplishments, he was still perceived as peripheral in ways that William had never been. The psychological complexity of this dynamic cannot be overstated. It's a collision of identity, ambition, and familial expectation, magnified by public scrutiny and historical precedent. Strategically, the rivalry introduced both risk